Palestine, a land of broken promises and enduring conflict, yet again stands on the precipice of being entirely remade.
This time, we return at the beginning of 1949. The conflict that began as a civil war in 1947 and evolved into a proper war in 1948 has almost ended. In its wake, it will, yet again, redraw the borders in the region.
Welcome to Season 1 of TimeGhost Cold War coverage in our series War to War, where we follow the wars that wouldn't end within a Cold World War, the beginning of the digital age, the atomic age, and the space age.
When we began to replicate our minds electronically, gained the power to end our very existence as a species, and discovered that we could truly reach for the stars. I am Sebastian Brandstetter.
And I am Spartacus Olsson. Today we are exploring how the 1948 Arab-Israeli War ends in 1949, how it settled, and what that means.
The newly formed state of Israel has, unquestionably, defied expectations. In a matter of months, its military capacity has outgrown that of its Arab neighbors. What first looked to be a fruitless struggle against overwhelming odds has been transformed into a decisive advantage.
So, as 1948 ends, Israel looks like it will be the winner. While this may have been more of a conflict for the Arab states to lose than for Israel to win, now the Arab states face a fait accompli, a Jewish state in the former British mandate of mandatory Palestine.
In the last episode, we left Operation Horev just after its opening blows on December 22nd. Now, as the new year dawns, we pick up exactly where we left off. Israeli brigades smash through the Negev, slam Egypt's right flank, and even nose across the Sinai sands toward El Arish. Amidst this advance, the Battle of Rafah erupts on January 3rd, marking Operation Horev's final decisive clash, as Israeli forces attempt to encircle Egyptian troops.
For the first time in the conflict, Egypt, the strongest Arab state, faces Israeli soldiers on its home soil, and Cairo's high command sees only two roads ahead: sign an armistice paper or risk having its entire expeditionary corps encircled and cut off.
That prospect ripples outward. If Egypt cannot hold the line, Syria, Lebanon, Transjordan, and Iraq, no, they cannot either. Arab capitals and military headquarters whisper the same verdict. The war is lost. It is time to salvage what can be saved.
In the first week of January, Cairo blinks. On January 5th or 6th, depending on whom you ask, the Egyptian government signals to the United Nations Cairo is ready to talk if Israel will halt its advance. One day later, acting UN mediator Dr. Ralph Bunche cables New York. A very promising development.
An armistice paving the way for talks enters into effect on the 7th. Israeli leader David Ben-Gurion jots in his diary, "A fabulous day. Did the war end today?"
Further factors have hastened Egypt's decision. Since late October, 4,000 Egyptian soldiers, including a young Gamal Abdel Nasser, have been bottled up in the Fallujah pocket. After almost 130 days under shell fire, with ammunition rationed and field dressing scarce, the commander radios Cairo. "Bodies emit a stench. The whole town is under continuous fire. I wish to hand it over to the Jews."
Then, there is also mounting external pressure. Invoking a 1936 treaty, Cairo has asked Britain for support. London, in turn, warns Tel Aviv that it is prepared to defend Egyptian territory if Israeli Defense Force IDF columns push further on to El Arish. However, Whitehall is beyond reluctant to re-enter the mandate they just abandoned months earlier, with Washington echoing the call for a ceasefire. Neither power wants to fight Israel, so both prod Egypt toward the conference table.
Dr. Bunche wastes no time. He picks the neutral Greek island of Rhodes, strips 2 floors of the Hotel des Roses, and sets a 3-step drill. Private soundings with each side, informal UN-chaired huddles, then joint sessions.
The delegations arrive on January 12th. While shells still fall around Latrun, Bunch is already gliding between suites with draft proposals.
Cairo lands with an ambitious wish list. It wants Israel back to the ceasefire line from October last year, a broad slice of the southern Negev, and permanent control of the Gaza Strip. But it will not start unless the besieged Fallujah Brigade, 4,000 men, Nasser among them, may march out under arms once an agreement is signed.
Ben-Gurion won't yield the Negev, yet he sees leverage in the Fallujah case, promising release costs little and silences Israel's southern front. Bunch folds the pledge into Article 3.
The Egyptian military forces in the Al-Fallujah area shall be withdrawn. This withdrawal shall begin on the day after that which follows the signing of this agreement at 0500 hours GMT and shall be beyond the Egypt-Palestine frontier.
So, Egypt shelves its wider demands, and on February 24th, the two delegations put pen to paper. Israel keeps the Negev, Egypt remains in Gaza, the crossroads of Uj al-Afir become a pinprick demilitarized zone, and both capitals stress that the pact is purely military in nature. 2 days later, the Fallujah column marches home, permitted to keep their arms, proudly bearing full regimental colors. The first domino has fallen.
Seeing Egypt making the exit, Beirut decides it can live with the president. The second domino begins to topple. Lebanon's aims are limited. Israeli evacuation of the southern Lebanese strip seized in Operation Hiram, and a formal end to shooting. They also insist that the line be set solely by military fact.
Arriving on March 1st, they settle matters in just 3 brisk, notably amicable weeks, in the war's shortest and least disputatious talks. Israel quits 13 villages and signs wording that hostilities do not exist. The frontier snaps back to the 1923 international line, and on March 23rd, the second armistice is signed.
Transjordan arrives on March 4th, seeking recognition of its hold on the West Bank, influence in Jerusalem, and, if possible, a wedge of Negev linking it to Egypt. Israel counters by demanding the Wadi Ara corridor, the narrow pass carrying the coast road and rail inland, and the nearby Little Triangle, a cluster of ridge-top towns dominating that route.
Talks immediately stall over the Negev. Israel doesn't budge because it sees the region as crucial for security, economic growth, and territorial integrity, while access to the Red Sea via the Gulf of Aqaba is a contributing factor. Israel views maintaining control of the whole Negev as essential for its future development and strategic depth. Jordan and the United Kingdom, on the other hand, want a territorial corridor because Jordan sees direct access to the Mediterranean as vital, and Britain desires territorial continuity between its Arab allies, Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq, and strategic positions in the region.
Before dawn on March 6th, Israel decides it would rather settle this militarily than diplomatically. 2 IDF spearheads roar south down the empty Arava Valley, one along western Wadis and the other across eastern flats, each bent on reaching the sea first. For 4 days, they race nearly 200 kilometers, leapfrogging water tankers and trading radio taunts. Midday on March 10th, Captain Avraham Bren Adan clatters into the abandoned post at Rashash on the Gulf of Aqaba. He's won the race. Lacking a regulation flag, his men rip a bedsheet, ink on 2 blue stripes, stitch on a Star of David cut from a first aid pouch, and hoist this improvised ink flag. Israel now touches the Red Sea. Operation Uvda, FACT, is the IDF's final military operation of the war, establishing the fact that the whole Negev is theirs.
Jordan protests the UN truce breach, but under prior orders offers no fight, and Britain reinforces nearby Aqaba, yet continues to bank on diplomacy. Bargaining eventually resumes, and before dawn on April 3rd, both delegations sign a frontier traced in green grease pencil, soon to be known as the Green Line. Israel keeps Wadi Ara and the Little Triangle, securing its coastal lifeline. Jordan gains a bulge southwest of Hebron, and armies stay 6 miles behind that line. and a special committee is tasked with Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Dead Sea Industries. Then comes Syria. But Damascus arrives in Rhodes under an entirely new banner. A coup on March 30th raises Colonel Husni Zaim to power. The fresh regime must sound fiercely anti-Zionist to shore up its credentials at home, yet Zaim also astonishes Bunch with overtures for a sweeping peace. He offers Ben-Gurion normal trade, open borders, even ambassadors, and pledges to resettle tens of thousands of Palestinian refugees inside Syria. But if, and only if, Israel will redraw the frontier to give Damascus half the Sea of Galilee.
Israel refuses. Ben-Gurion insists Syria first pull its troop back to the 1923 line and sign a conventional armistice. Months of stop-start sessions follow, the frostiest and longest of all. Israel, shielded by earlier accords, holds most cards. Syria, isolated, clings to a few villages it occupies for leverage.
At last, on July 20th, Zaim concedes. Syrian forces withdraw to the 1923 line. The vacated lands, plus slivers along the lake and the Hula marshes, become 3 demilitarized zones overseen by a mixed armistice commission. UN observers report their first incident reports within 48 hours. Proof that an armistice, however hard won, is only a pause.
Wait, aren't we forgetting something?
Yes, Baghdad, of course. But Iraq chooses a different exit. In early March 1949, it simply orders its expeditionary force home, handing its trenches in the West Bank to Jordan's Arab Legion. No Rhodes delegation, no signature. It was a question of principle for them, as well as one of national honor and prestige, not to enter into any negotiations with the Zionists and not to recognize the Zionist state.
By March 10th, the pullout is underway. The Jordan-Israel armistice line later wraps itself around the ground Iraqi troops had held. Iraq's foreign minister tells the UN he would accept whatever deals Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria reached, so long as Iraq itself signed nothing and recognized no one. Prestige preserved, soldiers repatriated, file closed.
August 11th. Dr. Bunch is relieved of his duties by the UN Security Council. The job is done, they say. They further make an announcement.
The Security Council, having noted with satisfaction the several armistice agreements concluded by means of negotiations between the parties involved, expresses the hope that the governments and authorities concerned will seek agreement by negotiations on the final settlements of all questions outstanding between them.
While the 4 accords have frozen the war, there are many such outstanding questions. Refugees remain in camps, coils of wire split Jerusalem, and no Arab state recognizes Israel.
Even so, diplomacy scores a milestone. In December 1950, Ralph Bunche will become the first person of color to receive the Nobel Peace Prize for his achievements. But what his ceasefire maps leave unresolved will test politicians, settlers, and refugees alike. One issue Israel needs to address internally is migration. 239,954 Jewish immigrants arrived during 1949 alone, the vanguard of 700,000 who will double the state's population by 1951. Ben-Gurion defined the bringing in of immigrants to expand the country's population as the top priority in the years to come. Borders, he said, were never absolute, and there was always the possibility of changing them later. And at that particular juncture, immigration was more urgent and vital than anything else.
Israel also desires to become a recognized state by the United Nations. On the 29th of November 1948, its first membership bid dies in the Security Council. 5 votes in favor, 1 against, 5 abstentions. A second probe then stalls over the winter.
But persistence pays off. On May 11th, the General Assembly adopts Resolution 273, making Israel the 59th member state. Israel pledges that it unreservedly accepts the obligations of the United Nations Charter and undertakes to honor them from the day when it becomes a member.
Washington and Moscow vote aye. The Arab Asian bloc votes no. London abstains. Nevertheless, the blue and white flag rises on the East River, while Arab capitals refuse handshakes. The Arab League reconvenes and repeats its mantra of non-recognition. Leaders dread being branded the men who sold Palestine.
Then there is the issue of Jerusalem. On December 9th, the UN General Assembly decides on full internationalization of the city. This Israel will not accept.
To the UN resolution, Ben-Gurion reacted with Churchillian defiance, in deeds as well as words. From the podium of the Knesset, he announced the decision to move the government offices from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and no time was lost between the announcement of this decision and its implementation.
The shift stakes sovereignty over Israel's half-city, defying the UN, the Vatican, Moscow, and most of the Arab world, but not Jordan, which also rejects blue helmet rule.
But Jerusalem is not the only issue that remains deadlocked. Talks also grind to a halt besides a Swiss lake. Since April, the Palestine Conciliation Commission has hosted Arabs and Israelis at Lausanne. The conference is supposed to settle three main areas: Jerusalem, borders, and most importantly, the question of Palestinian refugees.
Later, many will describe the gathering as singularly futile or an exercise in futility. The central issue of contention is repatriation. The Arab states demand that at the very least 400,000 Palestinian refugees be permitted to return home. Israel is not willing to meet that demand. Thus, unsurprisingly, Lausanne ends in failure, a failure that has dire consequences for hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children.
United Nations files count about 726,000 Palestinians displaced by December 1949. That's roughly half of the country's pre-war Arab population. This is the Nakba, the catastrophe. The tide starts with 70,000 fleeing by January 1948, rises past 100,000 in March, tops 250,000 even before Israel declares statehood, and crests after Operation Danny's July battles, with upwards of 50,000 forced from Lydda and Ramla alone, together with another 150 to 170,000 elsewhere. Eyewitnesses trail the refugees from Lydda and Ramla east. An Israeli trooper recalls utensils, then bodies, littering the road, and old people begging for water, but there was none. The Arab Legion radios Jordan. 70,000 are dispersed in Ramallah's streets, most of them poor. They represent a serious health problem. The Red Cross, reviewing September relief, admits substantially nothing in food or goods has reached refugees. Many die of thirst in the sweltering summer heat. But why does this tide of flight run almost entirely in one direction, away from the IDF?
Part of the answer is the brutal spiral of violence that predates the conflict by decades. Communal bloodletting peaks in 1948 as both sides strike civilians to spread terror. For example, when Israeli militant organizations stormed Deir Yazin, indiscriminately killing about 100 villagers, or when Arab irregulars and legion troops overrun Kfar Etzion, shooting some 120 Jewish defenders and non-combatants after surrender. Commanders on each side learned that emptied villages clear supply lines, so expulsions, or at least the encouragement of flight, become tools of war.
But, as we've seen, once the civil war turns into an open interstate conflict, the battlefield tilts sharply towards the IDF. Israeli columns slice through most contested districts, while Arab armies seize almost no Jewish territory after the opening blows of the war. Simply because far more Arab communities lie in the path of a superior Israeli advance, the overwhelming majority of the forcibly displaced and fleeing are Palestinian Arabs. Not through any surplus of mercy on one side, but through the raw geometry of power.
Whatever the reason, As a result, makeshift camps mushroom in Jericho's dust bowl, across Gaza's wind-blown dunes, hidden in pine groves near Tyre, or spread out over olive terraces outside Damascus. About 51 sites take shape in 1949, nothing more than canvas cities lacking basic infrastructure and goods, while doctors list malaria, diphtheria, and typhoid sweeping worn-out ranks. Infant mortality soars.
Ad hoc relief cannot cope, so on December 8, 1949, the General Assembly creates the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA in short. The agency will begin operations on May 1, 1950, and won't cease them to this day, 2025.
While aid limps forward, bulldozers race ahead. Before the war, Jews owned about 1,500 square kilometers of land. By 1950, Israel controls over 20,000 square kilometers, roughly 77% of Mandate Palestine's 26,000 square kilometers, up from the 56% allotted in 1947 partition plans. In plain terms, about 18,500 square kilometers of former Arab land change hands. Between 400 and 500 depopulated villages and towns are razed and resettled, and new immigrants fan into the emptied quarters of Jaffa, Haifa, Safad, and Beersheba.
This is premeditated, as statements by Ben-Gurion show. Along the borders and in each village we will take everything, as per our settlement needs. We will not let the Arabs back.
Moshe Dayan, head of the Israeli delegation at the armistice negotiations with Egypt, later sums it up. There's not one place built in this country that did not have a former Arab population.
Yet, many dispossessed refuse exile. IDF patrol logs tag them as Mistanenim, penetrators, to be stopped. Jordanian officers reply that they are simply peasants reclaiming their land. The same footprints appear in mixed armistice commission ledgers as burglary in one column, homecoming in another. For the ordinary people trying to reclaim their lost lives, the war that is over can still end in gunfire.
And that it does. In February 1949, patrols near Gaza report 148 infiltrators killed. June ambushes claim 93 dead, 33 captured, 96 pack animals shot. IDF estimates claim that about 30,000 refugees slipped back in late 1948 and early 49. Foreign ministry analysts raised the figure to 40,000 by mid-1951.
The slogan, Alavda, return, echoes through Gaza classrooms and Jericho coffee stalls. But, just as Lausanne proved doomed from the start, the refugee question, and especially the right of return, now seems doomed to remain unresolved for the foreseeable future.
Bulldozers, barbed wire, and UN ration cards have replaced artillery. But every midnight crossing of the ceasefire lines shows the war has merely changed shape, and the question of return still hangs between legal clauses and canvas roofs.
In barely 30 months, the map of Palestine has been erased and redrawn. The civil war that flared in 1947, the full-scale Arab-Israeli fighting of 1948, and this year's patchwork of armistice signatures have broken the old British mandate into new, uneasy parcels. This is how the former mandate of Palestine looks at the end of 1949. A single green pencil line looping 650 kilometers from the Lebanese ridge to the Gulf of Aqaba, traced at tables by UN surveyors who turn ceasefires into borders that no one yet dares call a frontier.
Southwest, the line shadows the 1906 frontier with Egypt, then widens into the sandy triangle of Al-Uja, Huja al-Hafir to British mapmakers, where the armistice bars troops but never settles sovereignty.
Northeast, the line skirts the Hula Marshes, glides along the eastern shores of Lake Tiberias, and climbs towards the Golan Heights, where Syrian gun pits command the water. In mid-December, a clutch of shells drives Ain Gev tractors from cotton rows. Israeli Mustangs skim the ridge in a 5-minute show of presence, and observers jot sporadic fire, no casualties, before filing the incident and moving on.
where the line encloses Jordan's realm. It wraps the West Bank and East Jerusalem. At Latrun, the Arab Legion still blocks Israel's highway to the capital, shunting every lorry onto the rock-cut detour through Wadi Ara.
Only Lebanon's corner lies quiet. Since Israel pulled back from 13 villages in March, the northern ridge has seen a single shepherd scuffle near Mizkaf Am. UN patrols call the stretch the Dozy sector, though they still pace it daily because quiet borders wake quickly here, and everywhere else. Inside Jerusalem, a barbed wire no man's land slices through stone alleys, from the old city to the Hashemites, the new west to Israel, while UN jeeps shuttle between Mandelbaum Gate and Government House, exchanging protest notes in place of rifle shots.
And this is the situation as we leave Palestine right at the end of 1949. New promises have reforged the war-torn region yet again, with redrawn borders, shaky armistice agreements, and hundreds of thousands wasting away in tense cities.
For now, while the fighting may have ended, the dying continues. One thing is clear to all: the war did not end because the belligerents found common ground. Rather, Arab pens were held by forced hands, guided by the unexpected strength of Israel and firmly gripped by foreign powers intent on finally quieting the region. So the question is this: can we expect anything but more broken promises from a land built upon them?
The underlying issues that caused the conflict remain as they were before. Worse, some of them have only grown in size. The refugee question, just to name one example. We here on War to War will be right here to cover how the situation develops further within the Cold War.
To become part of our mission, preventing future tragedies by learning from the mistakes of days past, join the TimeGhost army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. Together, we strive for a better tomorrow. Excelsior!